So why should you listen to someone like me talk about free will? Well, do you have a choice? How much control or choice do I have in my own life? Are the things I do or say really my own, or are they just a sum of complex circumstances and variables? Can I actually make a difference? Can people change? Can I really change? I want to make it clear that while I'm going to cover the topic of free will from a logical, rational, philosophical, and even scientific approach, when we ask, do we have free will? It's really a shorthand to ask lots of different questions like the ones I just listed. My motivation for doing this video actually comes from a lot of people in my own life who struggle with this subject and a lot of the feedback and questions I've gotten from you in the audience here. However, if you are someone with no familiarity with this topic, if you've never been in the dark recesses of Reddit or YouTube and are blissfully ignorant of this conversation on free will, and someone comes up to you and says, do you think we have free will? Your answer is most likely going to be, sure, I have free will. I make my own decisions all the time. Or the more emphatic, nobody tells me what to do. And if that happens to be you, I caution you to turn back now. Go back to your sports clips, your cute animal streams, your celebrity gossip, because ignorance really is bliss. And this topic touches on some of the darkest corners of what it means to be human and exist in this reality. We are going to have to boldly stare into the abyss to find that little bit of light to give us some direction. For me, the topic of free will isn't just some debate for depressed philosophy students to score points on online forums. This is a deeply essential topic, and our understanding of it is critical to the further development of civilization and humanity. Our perception of free will has more influence over the choices we make in how we treat ourselves, others, and society as a whole, more than any other belief or philosophical system. And if you caught the irony of that last sentence, you're already ahead of the game. Let's dive in. So I got a lot of feedback from my previous videos that you like a more Columbo format where I just give the answer up front and then spend the rest of the time talking and supporting the explanation. So, does free will exist? Yes. Do you have free will? That's where it gets more nuanced. You have the potential for free will. And that's really what's going to be at the core of this entire series. What's more interesting is the fact that whatever little free will you have, you probably hate it. Don't shake your head at me. We're going to show that that's true. It is the little bit of free will that you have that causes you the most pain, stress, and anxiety in life. And you will find that this basic truth of the human condition explains so many of the contradictions in our behavior. Finally, you will see that by the end of this series, giving a more practical answer to this debate enables us to improve our lives, to be better parents, to more effectively help others, and to ultimately act to build a better society as a whole. We are going to cover this topic from 4 key perspectives. We're going to cover it from a philosophical side, a psychological side, a scientific side, as in, is there room for physics and free will? Yes, there is. And finally, a little bit of the spiritual or religious as well. All right, to begin, any effective examination of an idea must start by defining terms. For this first video in the series, we're going to focus on defining what free will is. And to do that, we have to separate 3 main concepts. So, freedom, agency, and will. The first 2 are the easiest, and that's where we'll begin, because we can define them in juxtaposition to each other. Freedom is a term that we use to describe external circumstances relative to ourselves. So, do I have freedom to move? This is a question about my surroundings. For example, if I'm trapped in a box, I have external objects restricting my movement. Unless I'm a mime, but that's a whole different issue. At a higher level, when we speak of freedom in the context of society, we are looking at more abstract forces. Are there social pressures, laws, cultural norms, hierarchies, things that kind of arbitrarily restrict my choices in life? And don't get me wrong, freedom itself is a whole complicated subject. Too much freedom can lead to chaos and anarchy. Too little freedom leads to tyranny and fascism. But that is a topic for another video. Right now we're just defining terms. It is enough to understand that freedom is a word we use to refer to how or what degree external things impact our range of possible choices or options. Agency, on the other hand, is about our internal resources. It is a word we use to refer to our own capacity to act and impact the world around us. For example, I have the freedom to walk from point A to B, but I may lack the ability to do so. This can be because I broke my leg, or because point A is in New York and point B is in San Francisco. Now, that's a physical example, and in those situations we might just use the word ability, so I'll use a little more nuanced one. If I am a capable person who can read, move sufficiently enough to get around, have a basic understanding of different kinds of foods, can manage my own currency, then I might have the agency to do my own grocery shopping. Much like freedom, agency comes in degrees. I can have more or less freedom, and I can have more or less agency. So for example, if I have little knowledge of nutrition, or the companies making the food, or my own dietary needs, I may have the agency to buy food, but not the agency to buy food that is good for me. To have full agency in a situation, you need the physical capacity, the mental capacity, the emotional empowerment to act fully within your own internal and individual resources. So let's do a few more examples to tie these together with a little semantic math. If I have a comatose person chained to a bed, this person lacks both freedom and agency. Therefore, there is no possibility of this person ever being able to express free will. They may have the potential for free will, but for the sake of a logical discussion, it's irrelevant because we can never see it manifested. If I take a newborn baby and abandon it on a lush, deserted island with plenty of natural resources, technically, we can say that the baby is free or in a state of freedom. But we know that's not really true because it has no agency. It has no capacity to do anything with all those resources on the island. So freedom without agency is helplessness. On the other hand, if I have a fit, physically capable, intelligent, well-educated person with lots of experience, but I put them in a prison in solitary confinement, then that person has agency, at least potential agency, but they have no freedom. Agency without freedom is subjugation. Of course, all of these are very cruel scenarios, and you are probably disturbed by them, and you should be. But the reason you're disturbed is because these are all situations without the possibility of any expression of free will. And that alone should be a bit of a clue. But what about free will itself? If we have freedom and we have agency, then surely we have the potential for free will. How do we define will separately from freedom and agency? Will is the final ingredient to action. I must be free to act, I must have the agency to act, but I also must have the will to act. I am free to get out of bed in the morning. I have the agency to get out of bed in the morning. But do I want to get out of bed in the morning? If you're like me, that is a very relevant question. Unlike freedom and agency, which are very practical and easy to pin down terms, the word will is a bit more slippery. It is an abstract idea, almost exclusively poetic in nature. It's a very expansive word. Underneath it, we have terms like desire, motivation, intention, drive, perseverance, and many, many more. But while all of those words tend to have very specific applications, the word will is something we fall back on as a kind of encompassing term for whatever it is inside of us that fuels our actions and choices. In fact, it could be argued that the word will is closer to the word consciousness than it is motivation. So when we ask, do we have free will? What we are really asking is, are my actions and choices really mine? And do they, to any degree, come from something unique to myself as an individual? Or to put it as simply as possible, is what I want what I want? Well, here's where it gets a bit dark. And this is your last warning. This is your last chance to turn around and enjoy the eternal sunshine of the spotless mind. While free will has been a topic of debate since humanity first started recording our arguments, and has been, you know what, this is a bit too dark. Let's just turn the light up a little bit. Okay, that's better. So, while free will has been a subject of debate ever since we first started recording our arguments, and is the foundation of much of our religious theology and legal theory, the evidence has been mounting in recent generations that the idea of free will that we take for granted may not be as clear-cut as we think. First, there's biology. As soon as we discovered genetics, we began to realize that much of our personality, our preferences, and even our choice of romantic partners has all boiled down to a predisposition that is determined through genetics and biology. For example, many studies have been done on twins, both those that have grown up together and those that grew up separately. And they have revealed disturbing results on the similarities of life choices that they made. And that's something I don't necessarily have time to dig into deeply to, so if you're interested, you can look at the description for further links and reading. We have also documented strong links between genetics and mental illness. And there's even a phenomenon of people accidentally marrying their cousins because the predisposition to be kind of attracted to our own genealogy is so strong that not only did we used to do it, of course, willingly, but we end up often doing it on complete accident. And if you want to read more about that, also in the description. But these concepts are very widely known, and we know we have a lot of evidence of how genetics and biology influences our lives and decisions, so let's look at psychology. There's the nature versus nurture debate. So we already know about biology, but how much does your upbringing, your environment, and your circumstances, how much does that have to do with, how you turn out and what your personality is? And even though it's been a long-standing debate, which one weighs more, which one affects certain things, either way, free will seems to lose. People who are abused by their parents are much more likely to be people who end up abusing their kids or their spouses. As the old saying goes, hurt people hurt people. It is most likely that your political views and your religious views will align to those of your upbringing and your community, and your fashion choices and your food preferences, and so on. Neuroscience has uncovered much about how much our body controls our mind. If you're hungry, your brain is flooded with hormones that make it very hard to think about anything other than food. If you're tired, your body makes it very hard for your brain to think at all. And if you're horny, well, you get the idea. We literally have different parts of our brain that activate based on how we're feeling. When you are stressed out or afraid or having high anxiety, you literally have different parts of your brain that are activating and thinking than you otherwise would. And this is why so many people in very high stress situations often behave in ways that not only can they not explain, but they don't even recognize afterwards. Like, I don't even know who that person is. That's how shocking the differences in how our brain can be activated really, really is. And that's kind of a scary thought. And on top of all that, the brain and the body have another hidden taskmaster. We have the microbiome and the mycobiome. That's the different bacteria that lives in your gut and fungus. And these things have such a tremendous impact on our physical and mental well-being. In fact, a lot of depression and anxiety and mood issues and sleep issues have been connected to these imbalances in the different bacteria and fungi that we have in our gut. It's almost like, I've heard someone say once that, are we just giant meat machines to nurture bacteria? But that's how dramatic it can seem. Psychologically speaking, we are very easy to manipulate. Nobody wants to admit it, but you are. I mean, just look at cults. It's such a reliable formula that we actually have it written down. Step 1, profess hidden knowledge or insight that only special people can access. Step 2, create a strong us versus them mindset. Step 3, mark individuality as a sign of corruption and uniformity as an absolute good. Step 4, distance the in-group from all outside influence. Step 5, elevate your most brainwashed conforming members to high status while punishing dissent. Of course, all while saying it's for their own good. And if you just thought to yourself, oh, that sounds familiar, well, just know it's easy to identify a cult from the outside, but that doesn't mean you aren't in one. After all, most people in cults think everyone else is brainwashed. Now, as a marketing professional, I can also attest to the fact that you are very easy to manipulate. Now, there is a myth, and that myth is the idea that marketers can use subliminal advertising to put ideas in your head and make you want to do things.
If you listen closely, even the music I play in the gift shop has subtle hidden messages. Buy more keychains! Buy more keychains!
That is actually not true. That has been proven scientifically false. But there's another trick that marketers use all the time, and that is identity association. And what that means is that we take the identity that you want to associate with, and we create messaging and advertising that attaches our products and services to that identity that you are so aspiring to. You see, when you're young and foolish, or just foolish, you cope with the uncertainty and the vast options that exist in the world by picking an identity kind of out of the catalog to say, I'm going to associate with that one or be like that one, because it just makes it simpler sometimes to navigate the world, to just kind of have this preformed template available to you to aspire to. And there is no shortage of options. You have the rugged cowboy, the alpha male, the jet setter, the corporate slut, the tech bro, the spandic. That's what I call cyclists who wear spandex. The perfect suburban Stepford wife, the Instagram influencer, the PTO mom, and whatever the hell Lululemon cultists call themselves. Whatever image you are trying to aspire to, all I have to do as a marketer is say that my product is something that people like you like, or something that will help you get accepted by the people you are trying to be like. And that's it. This is why fast food ads feature plausible blue-collar types, why kitchen appliance ads feature the Stepford wives or the soccer moms. It's why Axe body spray exclusively features douchebags, and why Ford markets the F-150 to assholes. Your brain sucks at numbers and money. For example, you are more likely to buy a $10 product if I mark up the retail price to $20 and discount it to $9.99. In fact, you are so much more likely to buy that than if I just listed the product at $8. And it's not even close. That's how nuts our brains are with numbers and money. Then there's language, my favorite field of study. Your language and your vocabulary has a tremendous influence over how you think. For example, studies have shown that Western languages tend to be more conducive to linear thinking, whereas Eastern languages are more conducive to dialectical thinking. If you don't know a word for an idea or concept, then it's hard for it to be real in your mind and to legitimize it to others. So the words that we have are kind of like the options that we have, not only to describe our reality, but set the boundaries of it. And so languages that have words for things that we don't have people who think ideas that we don't always think of. For example, in German, there's a wonderful word, Verschlimmerung,
Verschlimmbesserung,
which means something that was meant to improve something but ended up making it worse. So for example, things like Windows Recall, Clippy, heck, Windows 11. You know what? Let's just make that the tagline for Microsoft. Imagine how much easier it would be to just have a word to describe stupid ideas like replacing menus with QR codes. It would just make conversation so much more seamless and the shame so much more palatable if we just had a designated word for the idea. But I'm getting off on a tangent. Let's get back to the horror at hand. Okay, so the point is the way we talk and our vocabulary sets the stage by which we work from in our interactions, in the way we evaluate ideas, and just in the way that we think about our reality. So it has a tremendous impact on the decisions that we make. And all that just scratches the surface. I don't have time to go into confirmation bias, anger bias, how we've shown that we vote against our interests, with the fact that when we are presented with policies without any political context, we make different decisions than when we're asked about a policy based on who said what with our political parties. It's a nightmare. But with all of that, now we get to what a lot of people in my audience and what a lot of people are basing this argument around today. There is a scientific idea that if everything in physics in the world is deterministic, meaning a line of cause and effect that can be identified, and if you have all the variables on one side, you can predict everything that's going to happen later, and that everything that happens then is reversible, so everything that will happen has already happened, and blah, 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 blah. This idea is called determinism. In determinism, your brain is just viewed as a giant collection of, chemicals and electromagnetic interactions. And if that's the case, then all of those things, just like chemistry and electrical engineering, all those things should be mechanical puzzles that if we had all the variables on one side, we could predict all the outcomes on the other. And it sounds logical, so it's a very difficult idea for people to try and work around. And we're not going to work around it, we're going to shatter it, but that's a whole nother thing. And this is an idea which I will address directly in this series, just not right now, because we need to define free will and its mechanisms better before we get to showing from a scientific or physics standpoint how it can exist. And then lastly, there's also the religious idea, which we do have to touch on. Because there are many people, not most, but many, who believe that if there is a God, and that God is all-powerful, that then they must be in control of every single little thing that happens, and therefore everything that happens is determined by God, and there is no free will or choice among us then about any particular outcome. And I think that is at least worth addressing. So, be it biology, be it science, psychology, philosophy, religion, it seems like free will is flanked on all sides. No matter how you look at it, it seems like we're just small cogs in a giant machine, and it's just running, and it will reach its inevitable end, and there's just absolutely nothing we can do about it. But here's the problem with all those biological and psychological influences that we just covered. All of these things are correlations, not causations. And as we know, everyone who confuses correlation with causation dies. Yes, all of these things influence your behavior. All of them tip the scales of probability against you, but none of them are absolute forms of control. Now, we're ignoring for a minute the kind of binary determinism and God controlling everything standpoint, okay? We'll get to those later. For example, I told you how easily marketers can manipulate you by appealing to your aspired self-image. Well, this only works if you aren't content with who you are. If you are one of those rare souls who is completely happy with themselves just the way they are, then there's absolutely nothing a marketer can do to control or influence your decision making. The problem with how we kind of study, experiment, and observe human behavior, especially when it comes to these sociological experiments and psychological tests, is that we are only observing human behavior in a moment or in a circumstance. And it's true that a very strong argument can be made that at any given moment, you are nothing more than the product of your biology, upbringing, knowledge, environment, and conditioning. But that's a moment. Your ability to have and exercise free will lies not in any given moment. It lies in your memory and your imagination. We humans have an amazing ability to collect data from past events, evaluate both those events and our behavior in them, and then produce an assessment of ourselves and a kind of forecast of our potential future. Based on how we use our memory to reflect on our own behavior and our imaginations to forecast the future, we can make real decisions of our own will to make changes in our lives. Even with an understanding that we are a combination of nature and nurture, memory and imagination give us the ability to nurture ourselves. Let me give you a simple real-life example. I'm coming off a very long day of work, and I'm tired, and I'm struggling to sleep. I am doom scrolling on my phone because it's the easiest way to get my dopamine fix. During this, an ad for a video game pops up I'm kind of interested in. In fact, it's about the 7th time I've seen this ad pop up today. That's because the website for the game I was interested in put a cookie on my phone, and now it's remarketing me wherever I go on the web. This time the ad shows a deal for 50% off. My poor, tired brain, stressed from work, low on discerning willpower here, falls prey to the trappings of poor thinking. I should get this on sale just in case someday I want to play it. The truth is, it's probably going to sit and collect virtual dust with the rest of my backlog because I don't have time to play games. But my brain loves fantasizing about a day that I might, especially when I'm tired. All these tricks work together and trigger me to make a mindless impulse purchase. This is a great example of me behaving like the predictable little automaton our economy has now come to depend on. However, I wake up the next morning, I'm well rested, I have the ability to think critically, I have a slight bit of shame for my mindless purchase in hindsight, and I realize this is a pattern of behavior I don't like about myself. I could say to myself, well, I'm never doing that again, but we all know that doesn't work. It's because I know that my tired brain can't always make good decisions. So instead, I use my memory to evaluate all the factors leading up to the impulse, and now I start constructing a plan to change. I realize that I have unhealthy attitudes toward work, and I am not giving my brain enough time to recharge during the day. I buy games more than I play them because I don't make personal time a priority. I conclude that my phone is not a healthy place to get a dopamine fix and should probably avoid it close to bedtime anyway. There's a lot more things I could go into, but the point is that I use my imagination to simulate different approaches to life altogether. This leads me to make a new series of preemptive decisions. I set better expectations at work, so I am putting in a more healthy workday. I move my phone charger to another room away from my better couch and leave it there till the next morning. I eliminate all the mindless distractions that are so easy to fall back on when you're tired, and I tell myself that I'm either going to sleep or do something deeply enjoyable. Now, I know the ever-growing backlog of games isn't something you can relate to, but we all have our bad habits and fallbacks of easy stimulation or comfort we aren't too proud of. Maybe it's trash TV, junk food, social media, etc. For some of you, maybe it's even an addiction, and that's obviously more serious, so we are going to cover that separately in a later video in this series. The point is that we just aren't always in control of ourselves in a given moment. But we do have the potential, through memory and imagination, to make decisions that have a governing effect over ourselves. Returning to my trademark reductionism, memory and imagination allow us to want to be a person who wants different things. It's how we pursue ideals over impulses and disciplines over desires. This mechanism is what so many people forget in the debate over free will. It not only changes the way we approach free will psychologically, but it also changes the ramifications for cause and effect from a scientific perspective. But as I said at the beginning of this video, free will is not a binary state. Memory and imagination are where the capacity for free will lives, but it doesn't mean you have the capability. And anyone who's ever bought a child a drum set understands this distinction. Having a musical instrument gives you the tool to make music, but not necessarily the ability. And that's what we're going to have to expand on as we continue this series. So let me bring this around and tidy it up a bit. The problem people keep having in this debate is that they confuse freedom, agency, and will. This is a big problem because freedom and agency are clearly dependent on external factors. In modern civilization, freedom is something that, to a very large degree, you are either given or permitted. Likewise, agency is something that is very largely provided through things like nature or nurture, so genetic, environment, education, mentorships, parenting. Free will is a bird that flies on the wings of freedom and agency. It is not the same as freedom and agency, but it is enabled by them. Free will is like the tree inside of a seed. Every seed has the potential to grow into a tree, but not all are given the circumstances to do so. The balance and interplay between these three concepts will become more clear as we go, but the point I want to end the video with is this. The irony of free will is that it's something we largely depend on others to enable us with. We depend on society as a whole to provide us the freedoms, that give us the choices, that give us the ability to express will, and we rely on things like parents, mentors, teachers, education systems, all of these things to grow our agency so that we have the ability to express our will. Perhaps it could be argued that the shrinking availability of freedom and agency is partly why people are becoming so skeptical and wondering, do we have free will at all? But my goal with this video is just to provide some initial definitions and to reset some thinking on this subject so that we can build on it as we go in this series. The next video will largely focus on all the obstacles that we have in the way of developing free will. Only near the end will we try to tackle this from both a scientific and a religious perspective, because that's going to be so much easier to do once we have so clearly defined what it is and how it works. My goal with this series was, instead of doing long 2-hour essays, to try to cut this into smaller segments so it's a little more digestible. So I do have a plan for the whole series, but this also gives me the chance to look at your comments and your feedback and adapt a bit as I go a little better to cover questions and concerns that come up and incorporate feedback. I appreciate all of your time, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.